Jonathan Reed, the CEO of Megamart, sat in his sleek, glass-walled office on the 45th floor of the company's headquarters. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Cars honking, people rushing to their destinations, and skyscrapers gleaming under the midday sun. But inside, Jonathan felt uneasy. Despite his success, he couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was missing. Reports showed declining customer satisfaction scores, employee turnover rates were climbing, and whispers of internal issues had reached his ears. Something wasn't right, and he needed answers. That's when an idea struck him, one bold enough to make a difference. What if he stepped out of his polished shoes and into the world of his frontline workers? He'd heard about other CEOs doing undercover stints to understand their businesses better, but this wasn't just about gathering data for Jonathan. It was personal. He wanted to see firsthand what life was like for the people who kept his empire running, the cashiers scanning groceries, the stock clerks organizing shelves, and the janitors keeping everything spotless. So, after weeks of planning, Jonathan decided to go undercover as Jack, a middle-aged man looking for temporary work at one of Megamart's busiest stores. The chosen location was store number 237, nestled in a quiet suburban town far from corporate headquarters. This particular store had been flagged in recent reports for poor performance, long lines, and disorganized aisles. If there was anywhere Jonathan could truly grasp the challenges faced by his employees, it would be here. Dressed in worn-out jeans, a faded hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, Jonathan walked through the automatic doors of store number 237 early one Monday morning. His heart raced, not from nerves but from excitement. For the first time in years, he felt like he was stepping into uncharted territory. From the moment he entered, chaos greeted him. The store was packed with customers pushing carts filled with groceries, children running between aisles, and harried employees trying to keep up. Shelves were half empty, checkout lines stretched endlessly, and the hum of frustration filled the air. A frazzled manager handed Jonathan a clipboard during orientation, barely glancing at him before rushing off to deal with yet another crisis. As Jonathan took in his surroundings, he realized this wasn't going to be easy, but it was exactly what he needed. Amidst the chaos, however, one person stood out. Her name was Emma Carter, a young cashier stationed at Register 5. Unlike many of her coworkers who moved mechanically through their tasks or muttered complaints under their breath, Emma radiated energy. She greeted every customer with a warm smile, no matter how tired she looked. Whether it was helping an elderly woman find her favorite cereal or calming down a frustrated parent whose coupon wouldn't scan, Emma handled each situation with grace and patience. What struck Jonathan most was how Emma didn't limit herself to her assigned duties. When she noticed a spill near her register, she grabbed a mop without hesitation. When a coworker fell behind on restocking, she pitched in without being asked. And when a customer struggled to reach an item on a high shelf, Emma was quick to offer assistance. To Jonathan, it seemed like Emma carried the weight of the entire store on her shoulders, and yet she did so willingly, with a spirit that refused to be dampened. As days turned into weeks, Jonathan found himself observing Emma more closely. During breaks, he'd sit beside her in the break room, pretending to eat his sandwich while asking casual questions about her job. Slowly, she opened up. Emma spoke about her passion for helping others, her love for the sense of community the store provided, and her dreams of moving up the ladder within Megamart. But beneath her optimism lay hints of struggle. She mentioned working 2 jobs to support herself and her younger brother after their parents passed away unexpectedly. Money was tight, and sleep was scarce, but Emma never let those hardships show in front of customers, or even her co-workers. Jonathan couldn't help but admire her resilience. Here was someone who gave her all to a company that, based on what he'd seen so far, didn't seem to appreciate her efforts. While other employees cut corners or complained about their workload, Emma remained steadfast, always finding ways to improve the experience for both customers and colleagues. Yet, despite her dedication, Jonathan noticed that Emma rarely received recognition. In fact, some of her coworkers barely acknowledged her presence unless they needed help. One evening, as Jonathan clocked out alongside Emma, He asked her why she stayed at Megamart despite the challenges. Her answer caught him off. Guard. I believe in this place, she said simply. Sure, it's tough sometimes, but I know I can make a difference. If I can brighten someone's day, even just for a moment, it makes all the hard work worth it. Her words lingered in Jonathan's mind long after they parted ways that night. By now, Jonathan had begun to piece together a troubling picture. The problems at store number 237 weren't isolated incidents. They reflected deeper systemic issues within the company. Poor communication, lack of support for frontline workers, and a culture that rewarded connections over merit. All of these factors contributed to the toxic environment he was witnessing. And yet, amidst it all, Emma shone like a beacon of hope. She reminded him of why he started Megamart in the first place, to create a business that valued its employees as much as its profits. But as Jonathan continued his undercover journey, he couldn't shake the growing sense of guilt. The longer he watched Emma pour her heart into her work without receiving the acknowledgement she deserved, the more he questioned whether he was doing enough as a leader. Was he truly serving his employees, or had he become too disconnected from the very foundation of his company? These thoughts haunted him as he prepared for the next phase of his mission, a series of tests designed to reveal the true character of those around him. Little did he know, the answers he sought would lead to revelations far greater than he ever anticipated. As Jonathan settled deeper into his role as Jack, he began spending more time around Emma during breaks and quieter moments at the store. At first, their conversations were light and casual, small talk about the weather, funny customer, stories, or the occasional complaint about how busy things got. But over time, Jonathan started asking questions that went beyond surface-level chatter. He wanted to know what drove Emma, why she worked so hard despite the challenges, and how she managed to stay positive in such a demanding environment. Emma didn't open up right away. Like many people who had been through tough times, she kept parts of her life private, sharing only bits and pieces when prompted. But as Jonathan showed genuine interest, listening intently without judgment, Emma gradually let her guard down. One afternoon, while they sat together in the break room eating microwaved leftovers, she shared something that left him deeply moved. My parents passed away 3 years ago, she said softly, staring at her sandwich as if choosing each word carefully. It was sudden, a car accident, and it changed everything overnight. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I was just finishing college, and my brother Liam was still in high school. Suddenly, I became responsible for everything, for paying bills, making sure we had food on the table, keeping a roof over our heads. It wasn't easy, but I promised myself I'd do whatever it took to give Liam a stable life. Jonathan listened, silently, his chest tightening with every sentence. He could hear the weight of her sacrifices in her voice. The late nights, the missed opportunities, the constant juggling act between work and family. Yet there was no bitterness in her tone, only determination. That's why I take these jobs seriously, Emma explained. Megamart might not be glamorous, but it pays the bills. And if I can make someone smile while I'm here, well, that makes it feel like I'm doing something meaningful. Her story struck a chord with Jonathan. Here was someone who had faced unimaginable loss and hardship yet chose to focus on helping others rather than dwelling on her own struggles. It was humbling, especially coming from someone who worked tirelessly for minimum wage while dealing with the stress of supporting a sibling. As much as Jonathan admired Emma's strength, he couldn't help but wonder why someone so talented hadn't advanced further in the company. Curious, Jonathan decided to dig a little deeper, not as a CEO, but as a fellow employee trying to understand the system. During lunch breaks, he casually asked other workers about promotions and career growth within Megamart. The responses were telling. Some shrugged indifferently, saying they didn't care enough to apply. Others rolled their eyes, muttering about favoritism and nepotism. One older stock clerk, who had been with the company for over a decade, leaned inconspiratorially and whispered, "If you're not related to someone upstairs or willing to kiss a lot of boots, good luck getting anywhere." These comments painted a bleak picture of the company Jonathan thought he knew so well. He remembered the countless meetings where executives boasted about Megamart's commitment to employee development and upward mobility. Yet, based on what he was hearing now, those promises seemed hollow. Employees like Emma, who poured their hearts into their work, were stuck in low-paying roles because the path to advancement was blocked by politics and bias. Determined to learn more, Jonathan subtly probed Emma about her own experiences. One evening, as they cleaned up after a particularly chaotic shift, he asked, "Have you ever thought about applying for a promotion? You've got the skills to move up, you know." Emma hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. Then she sighed and nodded. "Yeah, I've applied a few times," she admitted, "but nothing ever came of it. They say they'll get back to me, but they never do." Her voice trailed off, tinged with disappointment, but not anger. "I guess it's just how things are. Maybe I'm not cut out for management." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to tell her then and there that she was wrong, that she was exactly the kind of person Megamart needed in leadership roles. But he held back, reminding himself that revealing his identity too soon would ruin the purpose of his undercover mission. Instead, he resolved to pay closer attention to how Emma operated, hoping to gather evidence of her abilities that even the most skeptical manager couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, Jonathan observed Emma with renewed focus. What he saw confirmed everything he suspected, and more. On a typical shift, Emma handled dozens of transactions per hour, always double-checking prices and ensuring customers left satisfied. When lines grew long and tempers flared, she remained calm, diffusing tension with a kind word or a quick joke. Once, when a woman broke down in tears because she couldn't afford all the groceries in her cart, Emma quietly offered to cover the difference herself, slipping cash into the register unnoticed. Beyond her duties as a cashier, Emma consistently stepped up to fill gaps left by others. Stock clerks often neglected restocking shelves properly, leaving items scattered or misplaced. Without being asked, Emma organized entire sections during her downtime, making it easier for customers to find what they needed. When spills occurred, a frequent occurrence in the grocery aisles, she grabbed cleaning supplies faster than anyone else, preventing accidents before they happened. Even the janitorial staff, usually territorial about their responsibilities, appreciated her initiative. What impressed Jonathan most, however, was Emma's ability to inspire teamwork. Despite the negativity that sometimes permeated the store, she brought out the best in her coworkers. When tempers flared between employees, she acted as a mediator, encouraging collaboration instead of conflict. During particularly busy shifts, she rallied her colleagues, offering encouragement and practical tips to keep everyone motivated. "We're a team," she'd say with a smile. "Let's get through this together." Watching Emma in action, Jonathan realized she possessed qualities that many managers lacked: empathy, resilience, and an innate understanding of human nature. She didn't need a fancy title to lead. She did it naturally, earning respect through her actions rather than demanding it through authority. And yet, despite her undeniable talent, she remained overlooked and undervalued by the very system she supported. The injustice of it gnawed at Jonathan. He knew that if Emma represented the backbone of Megamart, then the company's future depended on people like her. But how could he fix a broken system that rewarded connections over competence? How could he ensure that hardworking individuals weren't pushed aside simply because they didn't have the right background? These questions weighed heavily on Jonathan as he continued his undercover stint. Each day brought new insights and new frustrations. He saw firsthand how policies designed to streamline operations often created unnecessary hurdles for frontline workers. He witnessed managers prioritizing numbers over people, focusing solely on sales targets while ignoring the morale of their teams. And he watched as Emma, despite her tireless efforts, received little recognition for her contributions. Still, Jonathan refused to lose hope. If anything, Emma's story fueled his determination to create change. He began jotting down notes in a small notebook he carried with him, documenting both the problems he encountered and potential solutions. From improving communication channels to implementing fairer promotion processes, He envisioned a future where employees like Emma could thrive without having to fight against systemic barriers. But as much as Jonathan wanted to act immediately, he knew he needed concrete evidence to back up his plans. So he devised a series of tests, challenges disguised as everyday situations, to evaluate the integrity and leadership potential of his employees. Little did he know, these tests would reveal truths far greater than he anticipated, forcing him to confront uncomfortable realities about his company and himself. As Jonathan continued his undercover journey, he realized it was time to take things a step further. Observing Emma and the other employees had given him valuable insights, but he needed more, specific examples that would expose the true character of the people around him. He decided to create real-life scenarios, subtle tests that would reveal how employees responded to challenges and opportunities. These situations weren't just about evaluating their skills. They were designed to uncover qualities like empathy, initiative, and leadership. And if anyone could rise to the occasion, Jonathan suspected it would be Emma. The first test came on a busy Saturday morning when the store was packed with customers stocking up for the weekend. Jonathan approached an elderly man who looked lost near the produce section. The man, wearing thick glasses and clutching a crumpled shopping list, seemed overwhelmed by the crowded aisles. Pretending to be another confused shopper, Jonathan struck up a conversation with him. "Hi there," he said casually. "Looks like you're looking for something. Need help?" The man nodded gratefully. "Yes, thank you. I'm trying to find canned peaches, but I can't seem to locate them. My wife loves them, and I promised her I'd bring some home today." Jonathan smiled sympathetically. "Don't worry. I'll help you figure it out." Then, instead of guiding the man himself, he stepped back and watched how others reacted. Several employees walked past, glancing at the man but offering no assistance. One even muttered under their breath, "Can't he read the signs?" before disappearing into the stockroom. It was disheartening to see such indifference, but Jonathan wasn't surprised. He'd already noticed how some staff members treated customers as obstacles rather than people. Then, almost predictably, Emma appeared. She had been restocking paper towels nearby when she spotted the elderly man standing uncertainly. Without hesitation, she approached him with a warm smile. "Good morning. Are you looking for something? I'd be happy to help." Relieved, the man handed over his list. "I need canned peaches, dear. Do you know where I might find them?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. Follow me. I'll show you exactly where they are." She led him to the correct aisle, pointing out not only the canned peaches but also a few alternative options in case they were out of stock. Along the way, she chatted with him, asking about his wife and sharing tips on which brands were on sale. By the time they reached the checkout line, the man's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you so much, young lady," he said, patting her hand. "You've made my day." Jonathan observed the entire interaction from a distance, silently impressed. While others ignored or dismissed the man, Emma had gone above and beyond to ensure he felt valued. Her actions weren't scripted or forced. They came naturally, driven by a genuine desire to help. This was exactly the kind of behavior Jonathan wanted to encourage across all Megamart locations. But he knew one test wasn't enough. To truly understand the depth of Emma's character and the shortcomings of others, he needed to push further. The second challenge arrived a few days later, during a particularly chaotic afternoon shift. A simulated inventory mishap had caused several high-demand products, including baby formula and laundry detergent, to go missing from the shelves. Customers began lining up at the service desk, demanding answers. Tempers flared as frustrated parents held crying infants and harried. Homemakers complained about wasted trips. Management scrambled to address the issue, but the lack of coordination only made matters worse. Amidst the chaos, Jonathan once again stepped back to observe. Some employees avoided the commotion altogether, pretending not to notice the growing frustration around them. Others blamed each other, pointing fingers and refusing to take responsibility. It was a classic example of workplace dysfunction, a situation that revealed cracks in the foundation of teamwork and accountability. But then, Emma stepped in. Though technically a cashier, she didn't wait for instructions from her superiors. Instead, she grabbed a walkie-talkie and began organizing a search party. "Okay, everyone," she announced confidently, rallying nearby co-workers. "Let's split up and check the back storage area. If we work together, we can find these items quickly and get them back on the shelves." Her tone was firm yet encouraging, leaving no room for excuses. Slowly but surely, other employees joined in, motivated by her energy and determination. Within 20 minutes, they located the misplaced products hidden behind a stack of pallets in the warehouse. Emma personally carried the boxes back to the sales floor, apologizing profusely to waiting customers and ensuring everyone left satisfied. Once again, Jonathan marveled at her ability to lead without authority. She hadn't been assigned to handle the situation, nor did she have any formal power over her colleagues. Yet she commanded respect simply by taking charge and demonstrating competence. Watching her navigate the crisis reminded Jonathan of the qualities he admired most in leaders: decisiveness, empathy, and a willingness to roll up your sleeves and get the job done. Despite her success, however, Emma remained humble. When the store manager praised her efforts later that evening, she shrugged modestly. "It wasn't just me," she insisted. "Everyone pitched in. We're a team, after all." These moments solidified Jonathan's belief that Emma was extraordinary, not because she performed heroic feats, but because she consistently chose kindness and diligence in situations where others opted for apathy or selfishness. Each test confirmed what he already suspected. She embodied the values Megamart claimed to represent, values that had somehow been lost in translation over the years. Yet, as proud as Jonathan was of Emma, he couldn't ignore the glaring contrasts between her actions and those of her co-workers. Why did some employees excel while others fell short? Was it a matter of personality, training, or something deeper rooted in the company culture? These questions haunted him as he reflected on what he'd learned so far. One evening after closing hours, Jonathan lingered in the break room, jotting notes in his small notebook. He listed observations, ideas, and potential solutions, determined to turn his findings into actionable change. As he wrote, he thought about Emma's story, the sacrifices she made, the barriers she faced, and the resilience she showed every single day. He thought about how many Emmas might exist within Megamart, quietly working hard and hoping for a chance to shine. Suddenly an idea struck him, an idea that went beyond promotions or raises. What if he could use Emma's journey as a catalyst for transformation? What if he could shine a spotlight on her dedication and use it to inspire others? After all, stories had power. They could motivate, unite, and drive change in ways policies and memos never could. With renewed purpose, Jonathan resolved to make Emma's story known, not just to store number 237, but to the entire company. He envisioned town hall meetings, internal newsletters, and training programs highlighting her example. He imagined creating mentorship initiatives that paired seasoned workers like Emma with newer employees eager to learn. Most importantly, he dreamed of building a culture where kindness and hard work were celebrated, not overlooked. But before he could implement any of these plans, Jonathan knew he needed to confront the elephant in the room, his own identity. For weeks he had blended into the background, observing and learning without revealing who he really was. Now, it was time to unmask, to step out of the shadows and acknowledge the debt he owed to Emma and others like her. Little did Jonathan realize, however, that his decision to reveal himself would set off a chain reaction of events far greater than he anticipated. The next chapter of his undercover mission would not only test his resolve but also force him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and the company he had built. And at the center of it all stood Emma, whose strength and compassion would continue to inspire everyone around her, including the man who once thought he had all the answers. The days at store number 237 continued to blur together for Jonathan, each one filled with observations, interactions, and moments that challenged his understanding of leadership and humanity. Emma remained the shining light in an otherwise chaotic environment, consistently proving her worth not just as an employee but as a person who truly cared about those around her. Yet despite her tireless efforts, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. something fragile and on the verge of breaking. It happened on a Thursday afternoon during one of the busiest shifts of the week. The store was packed with customers preparing for the weekend ahead, and the staff was stretched thin. Lines snaked through the aisles, shelves were half empty, and tensions ran high among both employees and shoppers. Jonathan had been restocking items near the front of the store when he noticed Emma moving faster than usual between registers, jumping in wherever she was needed. Her face was pale, and dark circles under her eyes hinted at exhaustion, but she kept pushing forward without complaint. At one point, Jonathan saw her pause briefly, leaning against a shelf to catch her breath. He wanted to say something, to ask if she was okay. But before he could approach, she straightened up and returned to work as though nothing had happened. Minutes later, however, disaster struck. As Emma scanned groceries for a customer, her hands began trembling slightly. She tried to steady herself, but her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the floor behind the register. Panic erupted instantly. Customers gasped, some stepping back while others rushed forward to help. Nearby coworkers froze, unsure of what to do, until one of them finally called for a manager. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, wheeling a stretcher into the crowded store. Jonathan watched in stunned silence as they loaded Emma onto it, her face pale and her eyes closed. For the first time since beginning his undercover mission, he felt completely powerless. As the ambulance sped away, leaving behind a trail of flashing lights, the store descended into disarray. Shoppers abandoned their carts, murmuring anxiously about what had just happened. Employees milled around aimlessly, too shocked to resume their tasks. Even the manager seemed paralyzed, unable to provide clear instructions or reassurance. It was chaos, but worse than that, it was indifference. No one stepped up to organize cleanup efforts, comfort concerned customers, or even check on Emma's condition. The absence of leadership was glaring, and it left Jonathan seething. That evening, after clocking out early, Jonathan made his way to the hospital where Emma had been taken. His mind raced with questions. Was she going to be okay? What had caused her collapse? And most importantly, why hadn't anyone noticed how much strain she was under before this happened? Guilt gnawed at him. He had seen the signs, the fatigue, the skipped meals, the relentless pace she maintained day after day, but he hadn't intervened. He told himself he was there to observe, not interfere. Now he realized how wrong he had been. When Jonathan arrived at the hospital, he found Emma lying in a bed in the emergency room, hooked up to monitors and IV drips. Her younger brother, Liam, sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. At 16, Liam looked younger than his age, his freckled face etched with worry. When Jonathan introduced himself as Jack, Liam nodded politely but didn't offer much conversation. Instead, he focused on his sister, stroking her hair and whispering words of encouragement. Eventually, Emma stirred awake. Seeing Jonathan, standing awkwardly near the doorway, she managed a weak smile. "Hey, Jack," she said softly. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan hesitated, unsure of how to respond. I heard what happened," he stammered. "I wanted to make sure." "You're okay," Emma sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "Just exhausted, I guess. They said it's stress and malnutrition. Nothing serious, but..." She trailed off, glancing at Liam before continuing. "I think my body finally gave out. I've been juggling too much for too long." Her honesty hit Jonathan like a punch, to the gut. He had suspected she was struggling, but hearing her admit it aloud brought the reality crashing down on him. This wasn't just burnout. It was a systemic failure, a reflection of a workplace culture that demanded too much from its employees without providing adequate support. And Emma wasn't alone. How many others were quietly suffering, afraid to speak up or convinced that their sacrifices were necessary to keep their jobs? Over the next hour, Jonathan listened as Emma opened up about her frustrations. She talked about the endless hours, the lack of breaks, and the constant pressure to meet unrealistic expectations. She described how applying for promotions felt futile because she never received feedback or even acknowledgement, that her applications had been reviewed. "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Like, no matter how hard I work, it doesn't matter. Maybe this job isn't for me anymore." Those words cut deep. Jonathan knew he couldn't let Emma walk away. Not now. Not when she represented everything Megamart should strive to be. But how could he convince her to stay without revealing his true identity? More importantly, how could he fix the broken system that had pushed her to this breaking point? Before leaving the hospital, Jonathan promised Emma he'd check on her again soon. As he drove home that night, his mind raced with possibilities. He thought about the notes he'd been taking throughout his undercover stint, the observations, the ideas, the potential solutions. He realized that fixing Megamart wouldn't be easy. It would require courage, transparency, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But if he didn't act now, he risked losing someone as valuable as Emma, and countless others like her. The turning point came the following morning. After a sleepless night spent reflecting on everything he'd witnessed, Jonathan decided it was time to reveal himself, not just to Emma, but to everyone at store No. 237. He knew it was risky. Unmasking as the CEO could alienate employees who might see him as a fraud or manipulator. But he also knew it was necessary. If he wanted to create real change, he needed to lead by example. That afternoon, Jonathan gathered the entire staff in the break room, claiming it was an urgent meeting called by management. As employees filed in, grumbling about yet another interruption to their already hectic day, Jonathan stood at the front of the room, heart pounding. When everyone had settled, he removed his baseball cap and looked directly at the group. "My name is Jonathan Reed," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. "I'm the CEO of Megamart." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Some employees exchanged bewildered glances while others stared at him in disbelief. One stock clerk muttered, "Wait, is this some kind of prank?" But Jonathan pressed on, undeterred. "For the past few weeks I've been working alongside you undercover," he explained. "I wanted to understand what life is really like for our frontline workers, the challenges you face, the pressures you endure, and the contributions you make every single day. What I've seen has been eye-opening and heartbreaking." He paused, scanning the room. Many employees shifted uncomfortably, unsure of where this was heading. Then, Jonathan turned his attention to Emma, who had been summoned to the meeting along with everyone else. She looked pale and frail, still recovering from her hospital visit, but her eyes widened in shock as Jonathan addressed her directly. "Emma Carter," he said, his voice softening, "you've shown me what it means to lead with kindness, integrity, and resilience. While others have ignored problems or passed the blame, you've stepped up time and time again, not because it's your job, but because it's who you are. You've inspired me and everyone in this room to be better." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as Jonathan continued. "Effective immediately, you are being promoted to assistant manager of this store. You'll receive a substantial raise, full benefits, and the opportunity to mentor others. Your dedication deserves recognition, and I won't let it go unnoticed any longer." The room erupted in applause, a mix of surprise and admiration filling the air. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to believe that her hard work mattered, that her sacrifices hadn't been in vain. As Jonathan embraced her, promising to implement sweeping reforms across the company, he knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Emma by his side, he felt ready to rebuild Megamart from the ground up, one act of kindness at a time. The announcement of Jonathan's true identity sent shockwaves through store number 237. Employees whispered among themselves, some in awe and others skeptical, as the reality of the situation sank in. The man they had known as Jack, the unassuming temp worker who swept floors and stocked shelves alongside them, was actually Jonathan Reed, the CEO of Megamart. It was a revelation that none of them could have predicted, and it left everyone questioning what this meant for the future of the store, and for themselves. Jonathan didn't waste any time addressing their concerns. Standing at the front of the break room, he spoke with a sincerity that silenced even the most cynical voices. He began by acknowledging the issues he had observed during his undercover stint, issues that went far beyond store number 237. "I came here to understand your struggles, and I've seen firsthand how hard you work," he said, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "But I've also seen the cracks in our system, the lack of support, the unfair promotion practices, the indifference from management. These are not just problems at this location. They're systemic failures that need to be fixed." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Some employees nodded in agreement while others exchanged uneasy glances. Jonathan knew he had to strike a balance between accountability and hope. He couldn't sugarcoat the truth, but he also needed to inspire confidence in his ability to lead change. "I'm not here to make empty promises," he continued. "What I saw yesterday, Emma collapsing from exhaustion, was a wake-up call. It's unacceptable that someone as talented and dedicated as Emma has been pushed to her limits without proper recognition or support. And she's not alone. Many of you are working tirelessly, often without acknowledgement, because you believe in this company. But belief isn't enough. You deserve more than that." As he spoke, Jonathan turned his attention back to Emma, who sat quietly near the front of the room. Her promotion to assistant manager had been announced, but he wanted to ensure she understood the magnitude of what it meant, not just for her, but for the entire team. "Emma represents everything we should strive to be as a company," he said firmly. "She leads by example, supports her coworkers, and puts customers first. From now on, she'll be leading efforts to improve operations here at store number 237. But this isn't just about one person. It's about creating a culture where everyone has the opportunity to succeed." To drive his point home, Jonathan outlined specific changes he planned to implement immediately. First, he pledged to overhaul the promotion process, ensuring that decisions were based on merit rather than favoritism. A transparent evaluation system would be introduced, allowing employees to track their progress and receive constructive feedback. Second, he promised to increase staffing levels and provide mandatory breaks during shifts, addressing the chronic understaffing that had contributed to burnout. Finally, he announced the creation of an employee advisory board, a group of frontline workers who would meet regularly with corporate leadership to share feedback and propose solutions. These commitments earned cautious applause from the staff, but Jonathan wasn't done yet. He knew actions spoke louder than words, and he intended to prove his dedication starting right away. Turning to Emma, he asked if she'd be willing to take charge of organizing the advisory board for store number 237. "Your perspective is invaluable," he told her. "If anyone can help us build a better workplace, it's you." Emma hesitated for a moment, still processing everything that had happened. Then slowly, she nodded. "I'll do my best," she said softly, her voice tinged with both gratitude and determination. "But I can't do it alone. We're a team, remember?" Her response drew smiles from several coworkers, including those who had previously dismissed her contributions. In that moment, something shifted within the group. For the first time in years, there was a sense of unity, a shared understanding. That change was possible if they worked together. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan kept his promises. He visited store number 237 frequently, meeting with employees to gather input and monitor progress. Under Emma's guidance, the advisory board quickly became a platform for honest dialogue. Workers voiced concerns about everything from outdated equipment to inadequate training programs, and Jonathan listened intently, taking notes and promising swift action. When new policies were implemented, such as flexible scheduling and improved health benefits, employees began to feel valued in ways they never had before. Emma embraced her new role with enthusiasm, channeling her natural leadership skills into mentoring others. She organized workshops to teach coworkers strategies for managing stress and conflict resolution, drawing on her own experiences to offer practical advice. During busy shifts, she encouraged teamwork by assigning tasks collaboratively, ensuring no one felt overwhelmed. Her positivity was contagious, spreading throughout the store like wildfire. Customers noticed the difference too. Lines moved faster, shelves stayed stocked, and interactions with staff became warmer and more personalized. Complaints dropped significantly, and customer satisfaction scores soared. Word of store number 237's transformation spread to nearby locations, prompting managers from other stores to visit and learn from Emma's methods. What had once been flagged as a struggling branch was now hailed as a model of excellence. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Emma herself. With her newfound responsibilities came a renewed sense of purpose. For so long she had doubted whether her efforts mattered, or if she'd ever escape the cycle of low-paying jobs and endless sacrifices. Now, standing behind the register wearing her new assistant manager badge, she felt a sense of pride she hadn't experienced in years. Her brother Liam noticed the change as well. "You seem happier," he remarked one evening over dinner, "like you finally believe in yourself." Emma smiled, setting down her fork. "I think I do," she admitted. "For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Still, Jonathan knew the journey wasn't over. Transforming one store was just the beginning. The real challenge lay in scaling these changes across the entire company. To tackle this, he convened a series of regional meetings with store managers and district supervisors, sharing insights from his time undercover and presenting data collected from store number 237. He emphasized the importance of listening to employees and empowering them to take ownership of their roles. "Our people are our greatest asset," he declared passionately. "If we invest in them, they'll invest in us." His message resonated deeply, sparking a wave of reforms throughout Megamart. Stores adopted similar advisory boards, giving frontline workers a voice in decision-making. Training programs were updated to focus on soft skills like empathy and communication, recognizing that customer service extended beyond transactions. Bonuses were tied not only to sales performance but also to employee retention and morale metrics, incentivizing managers to prioritize their team's well-being. Despite the progress, Jonathan remained vigilant. He understood that lasting change required constant effort and accountability. To ensure transparency, he launched a company-wide initiative called Megamart Cares, which included quarterly town halls where employees could ask questions directly to senior leadership. He also established a hotline for reporting unethical behavior or systemic issues anonymously, guaranteeing that every concern would be addressed promptly. As months passed, the ripple effects of Jonathan's undercover mission became undeniable. Employee turnover rates plummeted, productivity surged, and profits hit record highs. Analysts credited the turnaround to improved operational efficiency, but Jonathan knew the true secret lay in something simpler: treating people with respect and dignity. Yet even as success stories poured in, Jonathan couldn't forget the lessons he had learned. He often reflected on his time as Jack, remembering how easily he could have overlooked Emma's brilliance had he stayed in his ivory tower. That realization drove him to push even further, to dream bigger and bolder. One evening, as he reviewed plans for a new community outreach program, an idea struck him: scholarships. Inspired by Emma's sacrifices for her younger brother, Jonathan decided to create a foundation aimed at supporting the children of Megamart employees. Through partnerships with local schools and universities, the program would provide financial aid, tutoring, and mentorship opportunities to students pursuing higher education. It was a way to honor Emma's legacy while investing in the next generation of leaders. When Jonathan unveiled the scholarship initiative at the annual shareholders meeting, the room erupted in applause. Critics who had once questioned his unconventional approach were now singing his praises, calling him a visionary leader. As cameras flashed and reporters scribbled notes, Jonathan stepped aside to let Emma join him on stage. Dressed in a crisp blazer and smiling nervously, she stood beside him as he announced the program's launch. "This wouldn't have been possible without her," Jonathan said, gesturing to Emma. "She reminded me why we started Megamart in the first place: to serve our communities and uplift those around us. Today we're taking that mission to the next level." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she accepted the microphone. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice trembling with emotion. "This means more to me and to so many others than I can put into words." The audience erupted in cheers, and for a brief moment, Jonathan allowed himself to be. Months had passed since Jonathan Reed's undercover journey transformed store number 237, and, by extension, the entire Megamart Corporation. The changes he implemented rippled outward like waves, touching every corner of the business and beyond. Employees who once felt invisible now walked with their heads held high, knowing their contributions mattered. Customers returned to stores not just for convenience, but because they felt genuinely cared for. And in the heart of it all stood Emma Carter, the young cashier whose resilience and kindness had sparked a revolution. Emma settled into her role as assistant manager with grace and determination. Her days were still busy, perhaps even busier than before, but for the first time she felt supported. She no longer carried the weight of the store on her shoulders alone. Instead, she led a team that worked together seamlessly. Under her guidance, employees embraced a culture of collaboration, where helping one another became second nature. When challenges arose, they tackled them collectively, drawing strength from each other's experiences and ideas. One of Emma's proudest achievements was revamping the training program for new hires. Gone were the days of rushed orientations and vague instructions. Instead, Emma introduced hands-on workshops that emphasized empathy, problem-solving, and customer service. It's not just about ringing up groceries, she'd tell newcomers during orientation sessions. It's about making someone's day brighter, even if it's just for a moment. Her enthusiasm was infectious, turning what could have been dull lectures into engaging discussions. New employees left feeling inspired, ready to contribute meaningfully to the store. Meanwhile, Jonathan continued to champion the values Emma embodied. His leadership style shifted dramatically after his undercover experience. No longer content to rely solely on reports and presentations, he made regular visits to stores across the country, listening to employees and learning directly from their experiences. He encouraged open dialogue, inviting feedback, even criticism from everyone regardless of rank or tenure. This approach earned him widespread respect not only from frontline workers but also from skeptical executives who initially doubted his unconventional methods. The Megamart Cares Foundation quickly gained momentum, becoming a cornerstone of the company's mission. Scholarships funded through the program helped hundreds of children pursue dreams they might otherwise have abandoned due to financial constraints. Among the beneficiaries was Liam, Emma's younger brother. With the scholarship covering tuition and books, Liam enrolled in a prestigious university, majoring in engineering. For Emma, seeing her brother thrive academically was a source of immense pride and proof that hard work truly paid off. But the impact of Megamart Cares extended far beyond individual success stories. The foundation partnered with local organizations to address broader community needs, such as food insecurity and job placement services. Stores hosted donation drives, volunteer events, and educational seminars, creating stronger ties between Megamart and the neighborhoods it served. What began as a simple idea blossomed into a movement, proving that businesses could, and should, be forces for good. As positive changes unfolded within the company, Jonathan realized it was time to celebrate publicly. He announced plans for a grand reopening ceremony at Store 237, marking its transformation from a struggling branch to a beacon of excellence. The event would double as a launchpad for nationwide initiatives inspired by Emma's leadership. It was fitting, he thought, to honor the place where it all began. On the day of the ceremony, excitement buzzed through the air. Local dignitaries, media crews, and curious shoppers gathered outside the freshly renovated store, eager to witness the spectacle. Inside, employees bustled around, putting finishing touches on displays and ensuring everything sparkled. Emma stood near the entrance, wearing a tailored suit and clutching a speech written on a small index card. Though nervous, she radiated confidence, bolstered by the knowledge that this moment belonged not just to her, but to everyone who had fought alongside her. When Jonathan arrived, dressed in a sharp navy blazer, he immediately sought out Emma. "Ready?" he asked, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She nodded, managing a shaky smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ceremony began with a ribbon cutting, followed by speeches from Jonathan, local officials, and representatives. From the Megamart Cares Foundation. Then came Emma's turn. As she stepped up to the podium, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing her poised yet humble demeanor. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "When I started working at Megamart, I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "I didn't think anyone noticed the extra hours I put in or the times I stayed late to clean up spills. But then something amazing happened. People started noticing. Not just me, but all of us. Our hard work, our dedication, our humanity, it finally mattered." Her words struck a chord with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement. She went on to thank Jonathan for believing in her when she doubted herself, crediting him with giving her a platform to make a difference. "Change isn't easy," she admitted, "but it's possible when we come together, listen to each other, and refuse to settle for less than we deserve." By the time Emma finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Even seasoned reporters wiped away tears as they scrambled to capture every word. When Jonathan joined her at the podium, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, visibly moved by her eloquence and sincerity. "You saved me before you even knew who I was," he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The comment drew laughter and cheers from the crowd, cementing the bond between the CEO and the cashier-turned-leader. In the weeks following the ceremony, news of Megamart's transformation spread like wildfire. Feature articles appeared in national publications, praising the company for its innovative approach to employee engagement and social responsibility. Social media lit up with testimonials from customers and workers alike, sharing how Megamart had touched their lives. The narrative shifted entirely. What was once seen as a corporate giant disconnected from its roots was now celebrated as a model of ethical leadership. For Emma, life took on a new rhythm. Balancing her responsibilities as assistant manager with mentoring others kept her busy, but she found joy in every challenge. Her relationship with Jonathan evolved into a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared goals. They often brainstormed ideas over coffee, discussing ways to expand the Megamart Cares initiative and explore sustainable practices. Together, they dreamed of a future where businesses prioritized people over profits without sacrificing success. Liam thrived in college, sending Emma weekly updates filled with excitement about classes, projects, and newfound friendships. Knowing her sacrifices had paved the way for his opportunities filled her with a profound sense of fulfillment. On weekends, the siblings would sit together, reminiscing about their parents and imagining how proud they would be of everything they'd accomplished. As for Jonathan, he emerged from the experience forever changed. The man who once viewed himself as untouchable, a figurehead removed from the daily grind, now understood the power of humility and connection. By stepping out of his comfort zone, he had uncovered truths that reshaped not only his company, but also his perspective on leadership. Success, he realized, wasn't measured by profit margins or market share. It was reflected in the smiles of employees who felt valued and the gratitude of communities uplifted by compassion. The story of Jonathan and Emma became legend within Megamart, a testament to the extraordinary outcomes that arise when leaders listen, and ordinary people rise to meet extraordinary challenges. Their journey proved that change begins with a single act of kindness, grows through perseverance, and flourishes when nurtured by belief in a better tomorrow. And so, as the sun set on the newly reopened store, No. 237, casting golden light over its gleaming aisles and bustling registers, Emma and Jonathan stood side by side watching as families shopped, laughed, and connected. In that quiet moment, amidst the hum of activity, they shared a glance that spoke volumes. Neither needed to say a word. They both knew they had created something lasting, something meaningful. Because sometimes the smallest acts of courage can spark revolutions, and sometimes the most unlikely heroes can leave legacies that inspire generations to come.